Good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where in the world you are joining me from. I am Illuminati, and this is the Crypto and Cognac podcast show, as always, live every Thursday, 7 p.m. sharp Atlantic Standard Time on YouTube. Guys, very, very excited. This is season 5, episode 2, and we have an amazing conversation prepared for you. We are officially in a crypto bull run. How do I know? Because every single day, multiple times a day, we get questions on Crypto Caribbean, Instagram, asking, how do we get involved? How do we onboard? How easy is it? How hard is it for people in the Caribbean, particularly to on-ramp to exchanges, to their decentralized wallets, as the case may be? So we thought it was very, very important for this season to kick things off with a conversation about on-ramping. And I don't think that there is anyone better to really discuss this primarily in the Caribbean other than our guest today, Mr. Jarryon Paul. Jarryon, despite his very, very mature demeanor, is only 28 years old. He's a Trinbagonian entrepreneur, and his mission basically is to solve major problems in Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean, and the world at large. And I think this is something that I appreciate so much. I think a lot of the reasons why Caribbean businesses fail is because we take too small of a an outlook on what we can do, what we can solve. He is the founder, CEO of his current startup, which is Sunshine Exchange. And the vision for Sunshine Exchange is financial freedom for all, right? So, I mean, Jarryon is a serial entrepreneur. He's been doing it despite his young age for over a decade. And he views challenges and problems as opportunities for growth and opportunities for value creation for his team, members of his staff, his partners, his investors, and the wider community, the wider global community. So without further ado, I want to welcome Mr. Jarryon Paul to the podcast. Welcome back, Jarryon.
Hey Al, thanks for having me back. It's been a while since the last one, maybe season 1 or season 2.
Season one. You were one of the very first people to really have faith in me and what I was trying to do in terms of bridging that gap between what the mainstream Western society narratives were around this space and what we needed to be hearing and having translated for us here in the Caribbean. So I just checked back earlier today and I realized it's been 146 weeks since you were last on the podcast, which is 2.5 years. So, I mean, I know a lot has happened. It feels like the crypto space has changed tremendously since that time. And, sometimes I wonder, has it changed as much for us here in the Caribbean over that time? So I don't know if you want to introduce yourself further. I wanted to kind of start off the conversation with people getting the opportunity to catch up with you, what you've been doing. I know you've been doing a lot. I've seen you out there at FinTech Islands doing your thing. I see you across Europe right now doing your thing. So go ahead and catch up with the people.
Sure. Thanks for having me back, first of all. And great the consistency of your podcast, 100 and almost 50 episodes later, here we are again, so congrats to you on that.
Thanks, man.
And yeah, I would say that, I am much more of a generally quiet. I just like to work on the problem. I just stay focused on the problem at hand. Not a lot of fanfare, that sort of thing. I like that style of working. So, but that being said, I have been working, not just myself, but my team. Like you said, I'm currently in Europe. Just finished a business development workshop series over a week in the UK, where we met with a lot of ecosystem partners, understanding what is the UK market, what does the UK market have to offer startups like ours from the Caribbean, fintechs and otherwise, and was fortunate enough to meet with the ambassador of Trinidad and Tobago to the UK, or the High Commissioner, and very keen on some of the work that we're doing, some of the other startups in Trinidad and Tobago. And currently, like you said, journeying across Europe, understanding different economies, different currencies, different markets, understanding what is happening in the crypto space and the wider fintech space out in these regions, comparing and contrasting to our own region to understand where's the opportunity really? What is really the opportunity, and what is the blocks that we think are blocks? Are they really blocks? Or do we just think they're blocks? You know, so diving deep into some of these things in this market, in the US market as well, making a lot of headway in the US market in terms of our expansion plans into that region. And otherwise, just day in, day out, working with our team, with our members, with our partners and investors to bring this entire concept of Sunshine together, really for the people of Trinidad and Tobago and beyond. So that's what I have been up to, just wearing multiple hats as it goes when you're a founder. And especially in a developing space, it is not an easy thing, you know.
I mean,
go ahead.
Sure. I wanted to I wanted to give you your flowers as early as possible, because your level of consistency, your level of passion around what you've been trying to do in this space, I know firsthand how hard it is to be a startup founder in the Caribbean. And you are a startup founder, a tech startup founder, a tech startup founder in the blockchain space. So you just keep compounding more and more challenging environments onto yourself, and yet, you know, you've not been deterred by that. I've seen you, you know, go out there and have true conviction around, you know, what you think your potential is, what you think the potential for this space is. And, you know, again, consistency, I think, is key. And you've been consistent. You've never wavered in your passion around it. And that's why, you know, I'm excited to have this conversation with you, because I think you might be more uniquely positioned than most to discuss the opportunities, the challenges, the potential for on-ramps and even off-ramps for us here in the Caribbean. We're in the bull run. Everybody wants to go on and ride the bull. But here, it always seems, you know, a lot more difficult than anywhere else. So we know the challenge. I mean, it starts from oftentimes a regulatory perspective. So for you, how has the regulatory environment, how has regulations regarding crypto on-ramps and off-ramps really changed in the Caribbean since our last conversation?
Well, to be honest, I'm actually excited for this this kind of question, you know, and I think we could have a pretty open conversation about it, because since the last time I was on to this time, I mean, the change has not been, let's say, a major change in Trinidad and Tobago, and I would say in most Caribbean islands, right? You do have some Caribbean islands that have actually forged ahead and have set up sort of like global standards in this space. You have the Bahamas, for example, that has set up the DARE Act, DARE, which is a very comprehensive act around crypto assets, digital assets, cryptocurrency. And I mean, most companies who set up in the Caribbean will tend to look at that jurisdiction. You have companies coming from outside the region setting up in the Bahamas. Probably the most infamous being FTX. Of course, that was not a good showing on the Caribbean, what happened with FTX. But that being said, the DARE Act itself is very solid. And I think that regulators, policymakers in the Bahamas have done a really good job at that. In Trinidad and Tobago, where we are, I would say that things have been much slower. That being said, though, I think that, you know, a lot of the times we tend to look at the regulators as, okay, why are you not moving faster? Why can't you? How come we're not doing what the Bahamas is doing, X, Y, and Z? But as I started to appreciate and engaging with some of these regulators, and by some I mean all, there is so much more at play with these regulators. There's so much more happening behind the scenes. A lot of the times, the people who are in these regulatory bodies really want to help you. But you have to then understand, well, what is holding them back from being able to help you the way that you want to be helped, right? So getting into meeting some of these regulators and understanding, like, look, they want to push Trinidad and Tobago forward just as much as the entrepreneurs do, but we also need to help them, right? One of the ways that I see that can happen is by actually going and focusing on the problem, literally building the companies, just building the companies, and then going to the regulator and saying, hey, this is me, this is what I built, this is how it works, what do you think? Do I need this registration with this regulator over here? What about, I have these 4 questions over here, what's your take on this? What about this other thing? Can I have a meeting over here? So that's sort of the way that I think it's going in Trinidad and Tobago now. I think the latest thing has been 2017, there was a joint notice put out by the FIU, TTSEC, and the central bank, basically acknowledging the existence of digital assets, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, offering some advice to the public. And I mean, we have taken a look at that notice many times and designed our processes, designed our business around those to the best of our ability, taking in considerations from the global bodies that then feed information to the regulators around the world. So then when they make their regulations, we sort of already have a great understanding of what might be in them, right? It's not rocket science in terms of what goes into these regulations. It's really about consumer protection, keeping people safe, making sure that this is not a scam, making sure that, are you holding customer funds? If you are, then are you doing X? If you're not, then are you doing Y? So it's good things that the regulators will be eventually coming with. We would love to see some sort of some deeper, more formal regulation. But until such time, we will continue to engage because that is what pushes it forward.
Yeah, I think for the average person on the ground, they might say not much has changed. But for you and I, people who have been having these conversations with the regulator, I think we've seen a huge step forward. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with regulators, when you're dealing with the government, there's a lot of bureaucracy. So everything takes way longer than they would as compared to if it was private sector and a CEO making a decision, empowering a department to roll out certain things. There's a lot more, like you said, there's a lot more happening behind the scenes that we don't see. And I think some great steps that have taken place is that I think officially the regulator in Trinidad and Tobago has acknowledged the crypto industry as an industry, as a financial services industry that they need to partner with. We saw last year, we had our first ever industry conversation with the regulator. And this is something that they have on a quarterly basis with all the financial industries that they have supervisory power over, whether it be the banking, the insurance, the credit union industry. So even getting to the point where we are sitting around the table as advocates, as business people in the space, and being able to have those informal and formal conversations, being invited to participate in things like the financial inclusion strategy process for Trinidad and Tobago, them contemplating how blockchain and cryptocurrency might take part in that process, us being invited to conversations with the IMF, the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, to see what they as international bodies are doing and are recommending for the region, for Trinidad and Tobago. I think those are huge steps. It's still going to be some time. I know a recommendation paper has been submitted to the minister by the central bank as it relates to virtual assets and how they should be treated with. Where it goes from there at this point is up to the government. But like you said, I think I have a changed perspective to how I interpret the vision that these people in these regulatory positions have for Trinidad and Tobago, for the space, for progress on a whole, for innovation on a whole. For example, I think the governor of the central bank is a very, very progressive thinking person who so far has shown that, you know, he is well aware of what is taking place, and he's not necessarily adversarial to the space. And I think that is very much beneficial. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that yeah, there are a lot of good people doing who have been spending any time educating, like the governor. Would love to meet him at some point to have more of those kinds of conversations. But I mean, it's so interesting when you zoom out and you look at this space. I mean, we are in Trinidad and Tobago, and we look and we see, look, it's so difficult to do X, Y, or Z. When you zoom out and you look at how did other regions develop in these spaces or spaces before them, a really good example ends up being M-Money in Kenya, but not for the example like the straight fintech play example, as people might think. It's that they were facing the same sort of, you know, not getting that acknowledgement or support for this kind of financial development. And what they did, they actually switched industry. Instead of going through the banks where they were getting like, no, you can't do this, the central bank not taking them on, the commercial banks not taking them on, they ended up going to the telecoms and doing this entire thing through SMS and phones and satellites and whatnot. So, I mean, this is the nature of innovation. It is not something that anyone can sort of stop. It is a wave that is coming. It's either going to ride the wave or get wiped out. It's really one of the two. And it's the entrepreneur's job to try to ride this wave and to create something of value so that people can ride that wave as well. You know, so it's just the nature of the thing. Emerging industries, as I've started to zoom out and understand, okay, how did they do it in this region, in this country, in this region? You start to see a pattern.
Yeah, I mean, following straight off of that, and using the example of M-Money, how have you found local financial institutions, local banks, local players in that traditional space? How do you find they have facilitated or hampered the growth of the industry? And what would be your recommendation for entrepreneurs like yourself?
I think that generally across the board, local financial institutions have done the same things that they always do, which is attempt to the best of their ability to manage risk while making as much profit as they can, right? So they will look at anything new as maybe we won't touch it for 5 years, for 6 years, for 7 years, until we have to, kind of thing. And I think that's not unique to digital assets or cryptocurrency or anything as it relates to the banking system. I think this is just a big part of their culture and how they do things and how they operate. They would say, you know, well, this has got us here, let's continue doing it, kind of thing. That being said, I have found, and I think people will find, that banking, it comes down to relationships at the end of the day. It comes down to, in layman's terms, who do you know, but not in the way that people might think. It's more, who are you and what do you have to offer the bank? What are you bringing to the table besides all this risk in their eyes, at the very least? How are you de-risking this situation? How are you showing your legitimacy? Who are you partnered with? Have you talked to the regulators? What did they say?
Right.
X, Y, Z. It is a whole conversation, and it takes place over months, sometimes years, right? We have found that some financial institutions are more willing to have those conversations than others. Some won't have it at all. Some are willing to have it, right? And it's just a matter of having those conversations and making the relationships. I think that, I mean, cryptocurrency and digital assets are used in Trinidad and Tobago on a daily basis, right? As much as financial institutions, some of them maybe don't want that to be the case. This is a technology, this is an innovation that is not going away. It's out of the box, it's on the internet. People have bank accounts, people have personal bank accounts, people have business bank accounts, people use their bank accounts on a daily basis, and they purchase things, they buy things, they sell things, all sorts of things, physical products, digital products, services. People are doing that now, right? Banks some banks spend the time to understand what is happening, what is the activity that's happening with persons, either using personal accounts, cards, debit cards, credit cards. We try to understand what is happening. Other banks take more of a, well, if we see this, we're going to stop it approach. Of course, this is innovation, right? This is not anything that anyone in Trinidad and Tobago started or began or anything like that, but there's a reason why people want to use these technologies. And I think what may look as a problem, like in the introduction, might really be an opportunity, even for some of these financial institutions, once they can understand it and understand what the risk is, but also what the reward might be.
So with that said, with that perspective, do you think that there's been a shift in the retail attitude and perception of cryptocurrency in the region that may eventually drive these local institutions to take a different approach to it? Do you see like I said, a tide of acceptance, interest by the retail market that ultimately would create an environment that the bank sees more value than risk in this space?
I think that it is happening slowly. I think it's not a sharp sort of, this event happened. I think there would need to be some event that kind of kicks that off. I think from at least what I've been able to notice, I myself am not a banker. I myself did not come through the banking industry or anything like that. But from what I could tell, senior executives at banks in Trinidad and Tobago, the best ones, are doing their research. They are starting to have these conversations. They are attending conferences. They are in fintech islands. They're in different places, and they're actually getting educated. And I think we will see soon enough how some of those institutions are either looking to partner, spin out things themselves, spin out products themselves. I think we will see that take place. I don't think that it's happening en masse or anything like that in Trinidad and Tobago at the moment. I think in the Bahamas, there's a lot more activity. There are banks over in the Bahamas that will bank cryptocurrency companies that specifically work with cryptocurrency companies. So I think it's just a matter of development for our local sort of sector. But like I said, I think the banks are doing what the banks do, what they know how to do. That is what they're trained in. That's what they're professional in. That's what they understand how to do. And yeah, I think we will see some change in that area over time due to the nature of what we're talking about with digital assets and what it really is and how it really works. But also due to banks realizing that, hey, there may be an opportunity here to work with the right players, not necessarily just a free-for-all. I don't think we'll see that. I think we will see banks doing their homework and realizing, you know what, let's try to work with this one, or let's try to figure something out over here. And it's interesting because I read a paper. Some Trinidadian person did a dissertation on banks back in the day, and the way I think a lot of the time we think of banks as kind of working together, being in this kind of cabal, this kind of like oligopoly style kind of thing. Is if one raised their rates, all going to raise their rates. But the paper was very interesting because it talks about the history of banks and banking in Trinidad and Tobago, starting with Colonial Bank way back in the day, back when right after Britain would have captured Trinidad and Tobago and one of the colonies, and there was Colonial Bank, and basically how Colonial Bank went through the ages and changed into what is now Republic Bank. And what happened, how FCB came together, it was 3 other banks that came to be FCB. The whole history of banking, and he was basically tapping into how did the relationship of these banks change? How did the mergers and acquisitions happen, and under what conditions? So it was very interesting to realize that it wasn't always this kind of oligopoly thing. In fact, at different periods in time, it was more competitive. This bank wanted customers from that bank, or this bank saw the opportunity to buy this bank because this was happening in the global market or in the regional market. So understanding, again, zooming out and understanding some of these dynamics might help you understand, okay, where in the timeline are we? Are the banks still really are they really still meeting every Friday?
Is it still this, or are we seeing more of a competitive friction taking place in the market that may be to the benefit of the consumer base, that may provide opportunities for people like yourself and other EMIs or different players coming in and maybe disrupting that industry.
Yeah, and provide more value for the customers at the end of the day, right? Everyone knows we're moving on to this sort of digital kind of like set of, way of doing things. COVID showed that really clearly. So here we are. And I know that some banks are at the driver's seat, at that wheel, more so than other banks, right? So some banks want to grow, whereas other banks may be comfortable, right? So there are different dynamics that are taking place. And I think it's a good time to be an entrepreneur in the fintech space in Trinidad and Tobago. I think it's just to sort of time it. Like they say, timing is the most important factor as to like a startup success. So just understanding the environment and seeing where to fit in. But I do think that we will see movement within banks and their understanding of digital assets and how to de-risk it. I mean, we've even seen the largest asset manager in the world, offering 100%. Now Bitcoin ETFs and so on. And that has made so much news and so much waves within the banking industry, because banks sort of look at those companies as global successes. So when a company like that makes a move like that, they may ask, well, I wonder, should we be thinking about, I don't know exactly what conversations they have, but I imagine more conversations happening now than 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, I think the ETF is a great example of how this wave is gonna happen, because now it's created a new opportunity for persons who may previously have been hesitant to participate in this space, persons who may have had apprehensions about how they manage not just the risks, the tax implications, the management, the custody of the underlying Bitcoin token. The ETF now offers them another way to participate, and maybe this is where a good opportunity to get into the core of what today's topic was supposed to be about, in terms of how are people able to onboard at this time in 2024 into the crypto space. Have you seen a change? Has that change been positive? Has that change been negative? What do you see the next year, 2 years looking like in terms of creating those opportunities for people to onboard and off ramp from the space successfully?
Sure. So I would say that the appetite, the demand for digital assets, I mean, we can speak about Trinidad and Tobago, is definitely increasing in our country, in our case, for maybe different reasons as to like other countries. Like for Jamaica, for example, I would say it's a little further behind in terms of persons really wanting or demanding cryptocurrency, crypto assets, right? It's very different, right? In Barbados, it's also very different from Trinidad and Tobago. There's a different markets, different economic forces at play. So I would say, speaking to Trinidad and Tobago, that we personally witness large and increasing demand for digital assets in Trinidad and Tobago for a number of reasons. Whether persons have come over from another country and they now work here and they earn TT dollars, and now they need to find some way to get this money back to their mom or their brother or their cousin in Venezuela or in remittances. That's one of the reasons. You have persons who are engaged in as NFT artists, like Nicholas Huggins, for example, doing designs for Royal Castle and Caribbean Airlines and Google, and he is creating NFTs, selling them, and he then has to either get that money out, or maybe he wants to put more money in, or when that NFT sells, he gets money in that way in the form of a digital asset. So there are a bunch of ways that people want to use these digital assets. We are now starting to have people who suppliers are accepting stable coins as payment in a different country. You can't get us euros, you can't get us US dollars, but if you could get USDT, we'll accept USDT. So persons are now trying to figure, well, how do we get these digital assets? So, I mean, this is a major part of the service that we provide in terms of persons can come to us. We provide them with digital assets in the form of stable coins only. So not Bitcoin, not Ethereum, not Ripple, not your random meme coin, Shiba, whatever. We're not not Beeple coin, not whatever is the latest. You know, I really don't even know what they are, because it's just all we do is provide that one stable solution in terms of that stable coin. Once persons have it, then they can go ahead and figure, okay, well, if they want to exchange it for Bitcoin, if they want to send it to a supplier, or if they want to send it here or there, they start to understand, well, wait, I could move this dollar over the internet. And that is something that people are finding very useful, which is why there's so much demand in this current climate.
So you guys are suppliers as well as buyers?
Correct. So we will buy from the market. So when somebody, say an NFT artist, has sold some piece of NFT art and he or she wants to get the TT dollars now because they want to buy a vehicle, they can come to us and say, well, hey, I have X amount of stable coin here and I want to get Y amount of TT dollars. Can you do that? And we will say, well, yes, we could do that, because that is the business that we built. Because we noticed that, look, there's an opportunity where people want this asset, this stable coin, this digital asset, and they are willing to pay for it, right? And we said, okay, that's very interesting. We just kind of follow that until we have Sunshine today. It wasn't anything else besides, I see a gap and I want to try to fill it. And that then led us into additional problems, which are the problems that you encounter when you are trying to make that onboarding a seamless experience in a place like Trinidad and Tobago.
Right. So you guys, so primarily we existed in a space where it was peer-to-peer. Everything was peer-to-peer. And I think that created a challenge or a problem where there was certain risk factors, there was certain trust factors, people having to meet at police stations, people being defrauded. And you guys now operate as an intermediary to hedge against that risk element, because both parties can trust that Sunshine is a stable, recognized institution that I could, one, sell my crypto to, or I can buy my crypto from. So you guys are helping to de-risk the individual in that transaction. Would you say that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's the most important thing of what you just said is trust, right? I mean, it's all about trust. If at any point in time we do not complete a transaction, we will not be here. There will be no Sunshine. If there's no transaction to date since we started that we have not completed, right? So that is now thousands, probably getting into 10,000 plus transactions completed. And that is just either a buy or a sell, right? And that's just the nature of the business. This is financial services. It's all about compliance. It is all about trust. It's all about how seamless is your experience. It's all about, if I come here today and I tell my friend, is my friend going to get through or is my friend not going to get through? So, I mean, it's not a fly-by-night thing. And in Trinidad, the question of onboarding and offboarding, on-ramping and off-ramping, I mean, it still is heavily P2P driven. There are still so many individual actors in different WhatsApp groups, online, in different places that will buy and sell as individuals. And what I'm starting to notice is these individual buyers and sellers are now kind of creating their own trust systems where, you know, they may not have a full-blown compliance procedure and department and this sort of stuff, but you're starting to see in these groups is like, hey, has anyone ever done business with this person before? Has anyone ever done business with this person before? And there's two guys who jump in and say, well, yeah, I did a transaction, solid, this person's solid, this person. So, I mean, even in the P2P space, that trust factor, it's still getting introduced, because at the end of the day, it's money. And it's money moving from one place to another place. Never mind, we're not a bank and we're not a financial institution. We're not holding any customer funds. That being said, it's still about trust. So people have to be able to trust that this is going to work.
I think one of the important things that you just mentioned or you alluded to is that automatic creation or that automatic compliance in integration into the process. Because I think when people think cryptocurrency, when people think blockchain, they think we are compliance adverse, right? That we don't want any form of compliance. We don't want any form of protection, risk management, trust support, mitigation. But
Yep.
what you alluded to is that this system automatically incentivizes that, because trust ultimately is the main currency for transacting.
Exactly. It's all about trust. The whole thing is about trust. I mean, and I think that is where I think there will eventually be more synergies between digital asset companies and current financial institutions like banks, insurance companies, etc. When sort of everything gets peeled back enough to realize, wait, this is a similar thing. It's almost just like an upgrade to this aspect of
Right.
what we have over here. I mean, it's one of the things I think gets very misunderstood in cryptocurrency and crypto spaces, because you have a lot of people who are very I mean, the conversation before used to be centralization versus decentralization. But this is real life where there's a mix. You can't even have all good versus not all versus all bad, right? Everything is a mix
Balance.
of correct. So there must be some level of centralization at some level if you want to build something that is recognized by a government, by other businesses that have gone through these processes. This is not, like I said earlier, this is not rocket science. There are licenses that you can go and apply for and acquire in different parts of the world. Now, it might be expensive. It might be a challenge. You might need to hire a consultant. You might need to hire a consulting firm. But at the end of the day, these are things that people have done before. So it's just now applying those things to this new space. And that's what's taking place now. So, and I think once more of that takes place, I think we will find that onboarding and offboarding, on-ramping and off-ramping becomes easier in places like Trinidad and Tobago. But until that happens, I think we will find, I mean, it's still very, I mean, I'm curious what you would actually say as to how it is, as you are also in this space.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely correct. It is still very much peer to peer. I think different people, well, maybe not people, but different organizations, whether informal or formal, are creeping up to create situations or refuges of trust that people can carry out these transactions. I don't think that it is possible to have this happen without some underlying system of trust, whether that be decentralized or centralized, whether it be singularly owned or owned by a group, owned by a WhatsApp group, owned by a group of individuals, owned by a group of nodes, whether it be owned by one individual, in the case of some of the bigger players in the space like Binance and that kind of thing. I think there is ultimately going to be the need for some intermediary of trust. That might be a DEX liquidity pool, or it may be a centralized exchange that custodies those funds for you. But
it might even be a bank,
yes.
right? What is it? Chartered Standard, one of the largest Standard Chartered, sorry, one of the largest banks in the world. I mean, their story is very incredible in terms of how that bank even came to be.
Yeah.
But because of how it came together, it's such an international bank off the rip. It's very different from how most other banks kind of came to be. And just what they are doing in this space now, as it relates to digital assets and stable coins in particular, is very mind blowing to me. Being from Trinidad and Tobago, where the environment is a lot different and where financial actors sort of act very differently, because we don't share that history. Like I said, we started with Colonial Bank, right? They started as an international bank from day one. So when you zoom out and you start to see how is this whole thing taking place, you start to realize, wait, we might not be as bad off as we think on one hand.
Correct.
And also I understand how they are sort of moving ahead a lot faster because look at that history versus our history.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I think it feels like we overstate it, but I think it can't be overstated how early we are in this process, how nascent this industry is. Even for the established players who are coming into the space, even BlackRock, um, for them, this is very new. So I think that we need to have grace for how the process evolves. I think we need to have grace for even the failures like the FTXs. We need to have some grace for that. I think we need to respect the people who are forging ahead, the people who've taken chances, like the Bahamian government, and person from an entrepreneurship perspective, people like CZ, people like yourself, who are willing to risk their time, their energy, their capital to make things happen. But ultimately, I think I say it all the time. Everybody knows I say this all the time. This is my tag phrase: adoption is inevitable, right? Adoption is inevitable. So for me, it's just a matter of time. How much time? We don't know. It could happen all at once, or it could be a slow process, drip by drip, bucket must fill. But
Yep.
for me, I think it's just a matter of time. I think people need to trust in the innovative powers of the entrepreneur to make things happen and to fix problems. So I'm always excited to see people like yourself who are not deterred by rejection or challenges or problems, and people who embrace those things positively. So for me,
Yeah.
I want to see it happen. I'm cheering for you. Anything that we can help you with here at Crypto Caribbean, at the Crypto and Cognac podcast, to make it happen through our relationships with FinTech TT, through our relationships with the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, through our relationships with all the different people we've built relationships with across the region, across the world. I think it's important for everybody to add value where they can, and
Sure.
yeah, we'll get it done.
Definitely. And I mean, just immediately, for me, this conversation and being able to share a little bit about the journey and the story and talk a little bit about, I mean, most people would not, that this is already very helpful. I would say, I always tell people, especially when I'm having certain higher level meetings, when I'm meeting with different ambassadors. I was fortunate enough to meet with the High Commissioner in the UK, but then I was also fortunate enough to meet with the ambassador of the entire EU region for Trinidad and Tobago,
Right.
in Brussels, in Belgium. And in those meetings, I mean, I'm always something always comes out, which is that, hey, look, I'm a student of economics, right? I actually love economics and understanding the economy and understanding what is the currency and what is happening in the economy and what are the main drivers, and that is more my inquisition than, and then I sort of apply that to business, right? I sort of see opportunities from that economic lens. So for me, the way that having those conversations and being introduced, for example, to someone like the governor of the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, where he could sit and I could say, well, this is what we're doing and this is what I'm seeing. And I would just love talking to people who understand economics.
We will get that done. By the time you get back home, just remind me. We will organize to have that conversation happen for sure. You guys,
that would be great.
We are gonna benefit from sitting down with each other. But
That would
I
be
mean,
great.
we've been speaking for about 45 minutes, Jarryon. I want to thank you for being on. I want to give you the opportunity to maybe leave any last words with our listeners, with our viewers, in terms of your perspective, not only about on-ramping, but this space, maybe entrepreneurship in general. Just your last words, your thoughts.
Sure. So, first of all, thank you again. Always a pleasure. Would always like make myself available to come and have these kinds of conversations with you. I would say that, I'll start with entrepreneurship, and I'll try to keep this short, but entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. It is not easy, right? It is not easy to enter a new market that is developing, and you are trying to keep pace with this thing. And you know how much research you have to do. You know how much articles you have to read. You know how much dissertations you have to read. If you think this is going to be like a easy walk in the park kind of thing, you're just going to get $1 million at the end. This is not the game for you. It's not what it's sort of shown to be. It's a lot more hard grinding. It's a lot more the right people you meet along the way. I'm having this conversation with you now, but there's a team behind me that is supporting me, that is filling in the compliance role or the accounting role or the customer service or the, you know, many pieces you have to bring together to make it really work. I think a big thing is, I think there are a lot of people who think entrepreneurship is something else. But what it comes down to is it's problem solving. It is not how much you can complain to then get things to go your way. It's definitely not that, right? It is how much it is, I will make a way of no way every day. And until you are at the point where challenges are coming constantly and you are just normal, then you're not yet, that's when you're now starting to be an entrepreneur, I think. Yeah. You know, so I think that a lot of people in Trinidad and Tobago in our space, if we want to really grow this fintech space, grow this digital asset space, I think a lot of people need to take that reality check and take it with a grain of salt as well. Everybody's situation is different, right? But it is not an easy road. It has not been an easy road for us as Sunshine, but every single day the sun comes up again, doesn't it? So here we are. So that I think is really important for people to understand. Other than that, I would say that we are very excited for what is to come. There's a lot of groundwork that we have put in. There's a lot that's been happening behind the scenes as it relates to the on-ramp and off-ramp problem. We have been vying to solve that problem once and for all for the people of Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean and beyond. We will not actually stop until it gets to that point where it is solidly solved in a way that is sustainable, in a way that is beneficial to ourselves, to our members, to our partners who come along for the ride, and to our investors, until the vision of financial freedom for all is just a regular day, until it's just Monday and you don't even think about it because you're financially free. You could move this value into this form or that form or the other form. We will continue to do this work. And again, thank you, Al, for the opportunity to come and share some of this. And I'm looking forward to that meeting with the governor. And I'm also looking forward to the future.
Yeah, man. Jarryon, thank you so much for being on. Let's not wait another 146 weeks before we connect again.
Sure.
I look forward to our next conversation, buddy. Appreciate it tremendously. Be good. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. See ya.
Guys, that was Mr. Jarryon Paul, founder of Sunshine Exchange. When I talk to people like this is when I am even more steadfast in my belief that adoption is inevitable. With people like this working behind the scenes, of course, nothing that we've shared here this evening should be misconstrued as financial advice. Nobody telling you to do anything with your money. As always, it's all about information, conversation, and education. The ICE rule. Guys, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast. As usual, look forward to another amazing conversation next week. We're going to continue talking about on-ramping. We're going to have somebody on from a different territory talking about how they do it in their space. But in the meantime, Illuminati out. Be blessed, guys.